So, welcome to Indivisible Plymouth's very first podcast titled The Participation Project. I'm your host, Priscilla Anderson. And today on our very first episode, we welcome Kevin Canty, who's a candidate for reelection to the Plymouth Select Board. Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
We're happy to have you. Let me just sort of lean into who you are coming to us as a select board member. You're a lifelong resident of Plymouth, product of the Plymouth Public Schools, yay Plymouth Public Schools, graduate of Northeastern University and then Northeastern School of Law, served the community, the Commonwealth as a public defender, and you've been involved in Plymouth's local government for many years.
Yes.
Right? Awesome. I only know you as Kevin Canty, Select Board member. Mm-hmm. Could you just talk a little bit about what you've done in town government?
Sure.
You know, in the fairly recent past?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I came back to Plymouth to stay, I had commuted to Plymouth I commuted from Plymouth to Northeastern Law School when I was in law school. And when I decided to start my legal career from here, I decided it was also a good time to start giving back to my community. So I applied for and was appointed to the Advisory and Finance Committee in town.
That sounds fun.
It was. It's got an interesting name, but we heard, and the committee still does hear, every article that goes before town meeting and issues recommendations as to whether town meeting should or should not vote in favor of that particular article. Oh, okay. That includes budget items, capital projects. It includes bylaw changes, zoning bylaw changes. It includes petitioned articles from citizens to do various things, CPC, Community Preservation Committee articles. So everything that town meeting touches, which is most things in the community, goes through FinCom first. So it's a great opportunity. They say, all roads lead to Rome. In Plymouth's town government, all avenues go through the Advisory and Finance Committee.
That's amazing. So you got a really, really good overview of everything that's going on in the town. Yeah,
and how everything worked, who everybody was, and the processes and procedures in order to accomplish things. I got a good feel for the different FinCom. Also covers the precincts in advance of town meeting to explain to them what the vote of the FinCom was on the given articles. Okay. So you get to meet the town meeting members. Every precinct has its own unique makeup and character. Different precincts handle their caucuses differently. Different precincts interact with each other differently and have different points of view on things. So I was on that for 9 years. Wow. The last 4 years of it, I was the chair. That included COVID, which was an interesting experience. It included all the virtual town meetings that the community had done. We'd never done one, and then we did several in a row in order to continue the town's business during the pandemic while keeping everybody safe. Yeah. And then it also included the transition back to in-person town meeting. And now there's a remote option for town meeting, which did not exist prior to COVID. So now it's a hybrid meeting. We are the first municipality in the Commonwealth to have a hybrid town meeting. We've got that accomplished through special legislation. Oh, wow. So it increases accessibility, it increases participation, people that are out of town on a business trip or a family emergency or something, but can still spend the time for that particular day voting on the articles and representing their area of the community. Still get to participate. So I was on that committee for 9 years through all those ups and downs. Then I ran for Select Board in 2023. I was elected and have served in that capacity ever since. Select Board's a 5-member board that serves as the elected executive branch and policy setting arm of Plymouth's town government.
Amazing. That's a lot. I feel pretty comfortable that you're experienced to represent or you're up for the task of Select Board member. And one of the missions of Indivisible Plymouth's The Participation Project is to encourage community engagement and civic engagement. Mm-hmm. So I love that you brought up about sort of how the town government works, mm-hmm. Because I'm just learning about that myself. And,
yes.
you're never too old to ask questions.
Right.
So is my understanding that each precinct has 6?
9.
9.
They have 9. They have 9. We have a representative town meeting form of government. So each precinct has 9 town meeting members. They are elected in 3 year overlapping terms. So you elect 3 of them every year. And so this year 3 will be up. Those will serve for 3 years. Next year 3 more will be up. They will serve for 3 years, and so on and so forth. So there's 162 town meeting members with 18 precincts with 9 people in each.
Wow.
And then there's the moderator who generally just presides over town meeting, but in the event of a tie, can cast a deciding vote. Doesn't have to, but can cast a deciding vote to break a tie. So it's a very interesting process. You have people that have been town meeting members for decades, and then you have some that are just getting involved now. We've seen an upsurge in people getting involved based on what's been happening, in my opinion, at the national level, and seeing engagement in that area and getting people to care more about their local communities, which I think is a positive change, because although a lot of media attention and public consciousness is spent on who is at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, and that is certainly an important component of our lives. I mean, it's affecting us a lot now.
Yeah.
But who sits at 26 Court Street always affects you, your family, and your priorities a lot more, because they're deciding what happens in your community, how resources are going to be deployed or not deployed, what policies are going to go forward, what will not, what projects will happen. Who sits on your school committee decides a lot about what the character of your schools are going to look like and the composition thereof. And being involved at the local level, you get to see local results, and they affect everybody day to day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen many local people that are involved in local government move on and then run for state government offices as well.
Right. It can be an avenue to pursue higher office later. I mean, I've always thought, while I'm doing this job, I have to do it to the best of my ability. I got involved because when I was a kid growing up in West Plymouth, it was a great place to live. I didn't have to worry about things. It was safe. I could hang out with my friends, go to parks, have good recreation department sponsored activities. And it was just a very comfortable childhood. And, a lot of that had to do with my parents, sure, but a lot of it had also to do with people that were volunteering in their community to make Plymouth a better place. And when I had the opportunity to pass that on to the next generation, I wanted to do so, because I've always known that, there's some kid right now in West Plymouth who Plymouth is their whole world. And if I can make it a little better for them by what I'm doing day to day, I find that to be rewarding and fulfilling.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then when you went away to college, especially because it was in Boston, I'm sure that things looked very different than they did growing up here in Plymouth. Yeah. On in a lot of ways.
Right.
And I'm sure that's been able to sort of help you form as a person and formulate your values and wanting to come back here. And Plymouth's a very diverse town as well. Some portions of Plymouth more than others, but it's certainly I'm thinking about all the issues that we've had with ICE in the past year, right? Especially in North Plymouth, we've certainly had some. We had episodes where masked men got out of these vehicles and ripped people out of cars and took off with them. And that's terribly frightening for anyone to witness, but especially anyone who is part of an immigrant family or friends or employer or employee of or otherwise loves someone. It's terrifying, and we had a lot of people who have been afraid to leave their homes, afraid to send their kids to school, afraid to go to church, afraid to go to the grocery store. And it's my understanding that that is what then birthed the community trust bylaw, which is coming before the town meeting this weekend.
Right.
It'll all be voted on by the time this podcast gets out. But it certainly is something that I did want to ask you about anyway, because one of the things that people that are opposed to this community trust bylaw, from what I understand, is that they feel that it's redundant, that the police chief already kind of operates, a certain way, and why do we need to have this very official town-sponsored statement? So could you just explain what it is?
Sure. So I live in North Plymouth now. Grew up in West Plymouth, but I've lived in North Plymouth for the last 10 years. When ICE was in the community, they were sometimes just a couple streets away from my house, conducting themselves with what I would describe as essentially shock and awe tactics to try and it wasn't just about the people that they were grabbing at the time. It was designed to intimidate others to either self-deport or not come here to begin with.
Even the rest of the community.
Yes.
I mean, it made all of us scared.
Well, yeah. I mean, my concerns were multitudinous, but I had concerns about, at a base level, you have federal agents that are in unmarked cars, in what essentially is clothing you could get at an Army Navy surplus store, wearing masks.
Which we have down the street.
Exactly. And they're unidentifiable. And if you have them swooping in and surrounding a house or a vehicle, to other residents, it could very well look like a kidnapping taking place or an armed assault taking place. Yeah. And when they were here, they were inconsistent in when they were telling the Plymouth police, that they were here.
So you could have people calling the police and saying,
correct,
someone's getting kidnapped.
And then you have Plymouth police officers rolling up on a scene where federal agents are exercising their lawful authority, in a way I don't agree with, but it is their lawful authority. And you create a standoff between local police and federal law enforcement. So,
and if I just may interject, this is all going on in the middle of a street.
Correct. Right. In front of a school.
Cutting off traffic. Right. One of the times it was right in front of an elementary school.
Right. Yeah. And it's the kind of irresponsible activity that the federal government should not engage in, particularly not even telling local authorities that they're operating in the community. Every other federal agency, FBI, ATF, DEA, they've always told Plymouth police, even Mass State Police tells local police when they're operating within the borders of our community. So for ICE to just go rogue and not do that, regardless of how you feel about the broader immigration question and immigration debate, at a minimum, it's a public safety concern for everybody.
Yeah.
I also think that the way that we're treating people that just came here for a better life for their families and themselves is gross. I understand, people that are here that have committed a serious crime in their country of origin or committed a serious crime here, that's a very different conversation. But they're scooping up butchers and bakers and candlestick makers, hardworking people that are just looking for a better life. The only thing that they did wrong is they were born in the wrong place, a place that didn't have opportunity or was unsafe for them. A lot of people say, well, they should come and do it the right way. Well, the right way doesn't really exist for a lot of people. And if you and your family were desperate, would you wait around for a bureaucratic process to bring you to safety?
That may or may not even work.
Even happen. Right. You could be denied and then, or would you just pack your bag and make the best of it? They're not doing anything wrong. They're working jobs and providing for them here.
And paying taxes, by the way.
Correct. Yeah, they're paying taxes. Many times they're paying Social Security that they never get to benefit from because
they'll never collect.
Because they don't. Right. So it's a situation, and frankly, our local economy depends upon it. If Republicans wanted to enforce to deter immigration into this country, the most effective thing they could do is not send masked thugs into the community, but enforce minimum wage laws, because we are inviting people in because and exploiting them because they will work for less than an American in certain instances. But they don't want to do that. Instead, they want to identify this group as an other and blame them for problems that are caused by large corporations and billionaires taking away from the middle class. It's not the people taking things from you are not poor people coming here with nothing but the clothes on their back, trying to provide a better life for their family. the people taking things from you are people that are exploiting their workers and their employees, whether they are American citizens or immigrants, for their own wealth and advantage. And the fact that they weaponize immigration status to turn American middle and lower class people against foreign middle and lower class people is abhorrent, and we shouldn't participate in that. We have a lot more in common with middle class and lower class people from Brazil or Haiti or anywhere in South America or Africa than we do with people that are worried about what to do with their third yacht. But that is not where the priority is
But
directed.
what about the welfare queens and all of the fraud that I'm hearing so much about, that all lower income people who are apparently, a huge number of them are taking advantage of these systems.
Right. Well, when I was in law school, I had an opportunity. I work with indigent defendants right now in my legal work. But when I was in law school, I had an opportunity to work in a clinic that dealt with poverty law and practice, dealing with SNAP benefits and other benefits for women, infants, and children, unemployment benefits. So these benefit programs have, ever since the 80s and 90s, have significant requirements, hoops that people have to jump through in order to qualify for them. So the idea that people are just like living off the dole is ridiculous. And having a social safety net for people that need it is the least we can do when we live in a country that has so much and concentrates so many resources in the hands of so few. People are not asking for a lot. They're just asking to be able to live and have their family be safe. And whether they are an American citizen or someone that hails from somewhere else, I think that our diversity is our strength in this community, and we should be celebrating that rather than rejecting it. And we should be cognizant of the fact that we are fortunate to have so much here, and that the least we can do is welcome others to participate, particularly those that are working so hard to continue the American system.
And it's not just people that have come here illegally. There's a lot of people that have been here that did come legally,
right,
who have overstayed their visa.
Yeah, the border wall and stuff is ridiculous because it's not people. There are people that are entering in that way, but the most common way of quote unquote illegally entering the United States is coming here on a tourist or student visa and staying when it expires. So people are flying. They're not flying. They're not going over the wall, so to speak. They're coming into Logan Airport or LaGuardia or JFK or LAX. So I just find, and locally, I just found it to be really eroding public trust. So back to your question about the community trust bylaw, we had this experience in North Plymouth that was really causing a lot of heartache and concern in the community. We were hearing reports of people not taking their kids to school, people worried about if their kids were at school that their parents could be scooped up when the kids are in school, and what are those kids going to do? People not going to work. I know business owners in the community that have had to tell individuals to stay home at certain times, and not going to church or the grocery store, and just living in fear about this situation. And although we cannot directly as a municipality control what ICE does, because they are a federal law enforcement agency with an authority to do what they're doing, we have to fight that at the federal level through elections there. What we can do locally is not have our local police participate in it, because that creates a public safety concern too. Because
how's that?
Well, if you have a class of people in your community that don't feel safe coming to the police when they need help, or coming to the police when they see someone else, a citizen or just a resident from another country, be the victim of a crime and be a witness to prosecute the person that had perpetrated that, you create a class of people that are easy to victimize because they can't report crimes that you commit to them, and you create public safety concerns for crimes that they're witnesses to as well that cannot be prosecuted. And you, by having a second class of citizen in the community, You also invite and welcome, essentially, people to come into your community to victimize those people because they're
they're
easy
afraid
targets.
to call the police.
Correct. If you can be freely exploited, victimized, and attacked in a community, and you have no recourse through the law, then
all the bad guys find out and they come to Plymouth.
Right, and that our own history demonstrates that in this country. So the fact that we can't recognize and see that is foolish. So, and this administration, no matter how long it lasts, is a temporary situation. The Plymouth Police Department existed before this administration, before the 1.0 version of this administration, and will exist afterwards. And I don't want members of our community to distrust local law enforcement or other local officials and employees providing services based on the action of a rogue, extremely militant federal agency. So I had proposed a policy. We then had a hearing with the police chief where we went over. People in the community that were in favor of the proposed policy spoke. People that were against it spoke. We were able to reach a compromise where we enacted what was at that time not a public-facing police policy and made it public-facing so that people would know what their police will and will not do, because that was the objective the whole time.
Well, there's another reason, too, why we probably don't want our local police participating and helping, if you will, the federal agencies, because that's using our resources.
Correct. They're an extremely well-funded federal agency, and we are a community that is already struggling to meet basic service demands because we're a very middle-class community, and so there's no reason that we should be augmenting an extremely well-funded federal agency. They have the more than enough resources to conduct their operations. I wish they would conduct them differently, but they certainly do not need our assistance.
So the police chief came out and said, Plymouth is we're not spending our resources on federal operations anyway, right?
Right.
They explained, and I'd love it if you would kind of detail what the police are allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do, not because of federally, but how they were already operating.
Sure.
Because my understanding is they haven't really changed much as far as what they're doing.
Right.
What they're not.
So the distinction was more that people didn't know what they were and were not doing, and now they have eyes on that. We had a public hearing about it, and now we have a public-facing policy that residents in the community can look at. The police do not participate in federal immigration enforcement, nor do they hold someone that is eligible for release on whatever they were in the police department's custody for any longer than they would be held for the purposes of assisting federal law immigration enforcement. So the Plymouth police are focused on local issues, not federal immigration issues. And the community trust bylaw, the good thing about the select board policy is it could be enacted quickly. It was able to be enacted at that hearing in January. The bad thing is any 3 members of the select board could reverse that policy at any time and choose a different direction if they chose to do that.
And then depending on, say, 10, 15 years down the road, a new police chief comes in and says,
Right.
hey, we're going to pick up the phone to ICE and say, hey, we just picked up so-and-so.
Correct. A new police chief and or a new select board could do a complete 180 on the current direction. They're subject to state law requirements as well, but there could be a policy shift or an agreement to cooperate with ICE, which is permissible, which is what the Plymouth County Sheriff's Department does. They voluntarily cooperate with ICE. So we didn't want that. So there were members of the community that put forward this community trust bylaw so that it would be a bylaw that could only be passed by and only repealed or modified by town meeting. So it's not subject to 3 members of a 5-member board or 1 police chief changing his, her, or their minds, but instead up to the majority, require a majority vote of town meeting to be modified or changed or rescinded in the future. So it's much more durable and much more reliable for members of the community. It takes longer to enact, but also it takes longer to change or get rid of. So that it's sort of a belt and suspenders approach in some regards, but I don't think it's redundant because it's 2 different things. It achieves a similar purpose, but through 2 different means. And I do believe in civilian government and oversight. over this type of activity. And I think that the town meeting has the authority to pass bylaws, and they should enact that authority in this case.
And that's coming up this weekend. And
Yes, it's Article 37 in the annual town meeting warrant, so it will likely be heard on Saturday. Unless town meeting goes long, then it would be heard on Monday evening. Yeah.
Okay, so probably this will all be done by the time we get aired.
It very well may. Yes.
But I think it's great to talk about it and explain to people too, because, you know, there's different ways of getting this information out to the people that are living right in the thick of all this and in the thick of all the fear and everything.
And it's cathartic to see people, and comforting, I would think, to see people in the community standing up for the underrepresented.
Yeah, and they have support.
Correct, that there's people that have the privilege of being able to engage in the civil body politic and advocate for what they believe in, and they're standing up for people that are less able to do that because of their concerns about the current. And we've also had the opportunity to see people in the community, immigrants or family members of immigrants, have been speaking up as well and joining their voices into the narrative, which I think is very powerful and can be very persuasive, because, you know, the Trump administration wants to dehumanize this class of people and treat them like another. But they love their kids just as much as we do. They care about, you know, their family, their pets just as much as we do. They have the same concerns about making ends meet. And
I can't imagine being afraid that I would be picked up and not have childcare.
Correct.
For my kid that was at school.
Right, and your whole life could change in an instant. It would be very challenging.
Yeah, it would be terrifying.
Right.
And when we were talking about how there's a much smaller abuse of government resources than people kind of think there are, and you mentioned there's a bunch of hoops, and I will admit that on certain occasions throughout my life, I've been fortunate enough to be the recipient of help from some of those government taxpayer-funded programs. And I can tell you, I went to college. I graduated with a bachelor's degree. It is not easy to fill out that paperwork and come up with all the documentation that you need to provide. Rightfully so, you should have to, you know, prove that you're low income or whatever. Yeah. But it is not an easy thing to weed through all of the bureaucracy that you have to in order to get on one of those programs.
It's a difficult process, and it can be denied, and it can be a bureaucratic nightmare at times. So it's certainly not something that there is large scale fraud or abuse.
Yeah, it made me laugh when I hear that, because I'm thinking it's really hard. It's hard to do.
Right.
So thank you for commenting on all of that. So Kevin, another question I wanted to ask you about that's also going to be coming up this weekend at town meeting, but I think it's important to talk about, is the home rule issue, which I'm hoping you'll explain to me what that is. But my understanding is that it's about the cost that the town pays for the health insurance for town employees when they're hired versus when they retire.
Sure. So it's there was special legislation, often colloquially referred to as the Special Act, that was passed in 2003. We are the only municipality out of 351 municipalities in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that has this particular legislation.
The only one.
The only one. And what it does is, when you are hired for the town of Plymouth, you have a breakdown in terms of your contribution and the town's contribution of your health care. And ordinarily what you would pay when you retire is whatever the rate is that you paid when you retired.
Yeah, like the week before.
Correct.
Same
but
rate.
This special legislation means that for Plymouth employees that retire from the community after being vested, that they revert back to the contribution rate that they started at. So there are some employees that started when this took effect at a 90% town, 10% employee contribution rate. And when they retire, right now it's 70-30. So 70% town, 30% employee. But if those employees retire, they go back to 90% town, 10% employee, or retiree at that point.
Yeah.
And
it's great for them.
It is a great benefit for them. And at the time, it made sense because at the time, town employees were competing more on and when you go to the negotiating table, the town only has so many resources. The unions only have, they have their priorities. The town have their priorities, and you come to a compromise. And you can either negotiate towards tweaking salaries and monetary compensation, or tweaking your benefits, including your health insurance. At that time, the town employee unions were focusing primarily on benefits, and we were competing with other municipalities on the benefits side of the equation.
Okay, so we didn't want to lose any teachers.
Yeah, we wanted to attract people based on benefits and say, come to Plymouth because of this, right? However, what we're seeing is we are the training ground for other municipalities right now. People are coming here and then taking a job elsewhere because at other municipalities like Hingham, Duxbury, they pay better. And many people getting into public service now, although benefits are still important, they care more about salary and compensation. And the town is unable to drive up salary at a rate that is competitive with other municipalities, while the benefit side is taking so much of the pie.
Got it.
However, so originally, back in, I think it was December, a colleague on the board proposed this special legislation, which I thought made sense, but it would only affect people that were not yet hired, because she believed, and I believe, once you make a promise to an employee and they've detrimentally relied upon that in terms of planning for their life, you can't rescind that. You can't sweep the rug out from under them.
Right.
So that wouldn't be fair, whether it's a current employee or a current retiree. However, not making the promise to people that haven't been hired yet, who haven't been made a promise yet, is a very different story. So that was what my colleague's proposal originally was, which I supported. This is a citizen's petition by a town meeting member who thought it was a good idea and put it together to enact essentially my colleague's proposal. But again, it only affects people that have not yet been hired by Plymouth, not had any promises made to them. So any current employee will retain the benefits of the special legislation. Any current retiree will retain the benefits of that.
So why does the teachers union want people to vote for your opponents?
Well, because they were opposed to it, and because typically some of the union presidents can combat very strongly for the change in any benefits, which I understand.
Sure. Because that almost sets a precedent.
It could, but this one is carefully tailored to only affect people that have not yet been hired yet, and we would be at a level playing field with every other municipality. The issue that we're having really is that Plymouth, there's a liability called other post-employment benefits, which it's not your pension for retirees, but it's your benefits package for retirees. Every municipality in Massachusetts has OPEB, is what it's called, and it's a liability that needs to be funded like Social Security on the federal level.
Okay.
But typically, a community's OPEB liability is based upon the size of their population, because the size of population requires more employees to provide services, and more employees that provide services mean more retirees. So the top 4 communities in Massachusetts for OPEB liability are the city of Boston, the city of Worcester, the city of Springfield, and the town of Plymouth.
What?
So there are a lot of other cities, a lot of other larger communities by population that do not have the OPEB liability that we do. And why? Because of the special legislation. This is something that would not see immediate savings, but it would over time allow the community to realize savings and be more competitive, to give employees salary compensation or other benefits that they bargain for, rather than being locked into this thing, which at the time it was made in 2003 made sense, but now is confining the town to compete with decades-old priorities.
Okay. So we're not on the same playing field as far as attracting the best.
Which is why
employees.
People are leaving. We are. If you talk to town employees, they will tell you They have been saying for years that this town is the training ground for other communities. So the argument from the unions has been, the union presidents has been, this is a recruitment and retention tool. But it isn't, because if it were, then we wouldn't be seeing a mass exodus of our employees to go work in Marshfield, Hingham, Duxbury, places like that, because they'd want to retain this benefit. There are certainly, now employees are not a monolith. I'm sure there are some employees that do like the benefit the way it is, but we are seeing in the aggregate that is working to our disadvantage. And it's also something that we just simply can't afford to sustain. We could afford it at the time that it was enacted, but it's becoming increasingly burdensome over time. And I don't want to see people be laid off to meet this obligation in the future. And I would point out, too, that the layoff structure for union contracts is last in, first out. So the same people that would be have their benefit structure changed by this special legislation and that the union presidents are trying to maintain this benefit for, they're the people that would be laid off if the town needed to first. And you know what happens when you get laid off? You lose your health care. So either way, it's this demographic that's going to be affected. And my colleague and I wanted to make it so that these individuals would have more of an opportunity to compete in the salary component that their generation seems to value, as opposed to something from decades ago that no longer is serving the town's best interest, or for the younger generation, the employee's interest. But again, no current employees, no current retirees would be affected by the change. It would only be going forward.
Okay, so we'll see what happens this weekend.
Yes, it's a special town meeting article, Article 10 in the special town meeting, the citizens petition, not the proposal by my colleague. So it'll be up to town meeting to make a determination on that. But I think it's worth having a conversation about as a community at a minimum, if this is something we want to sustain and maintain, or whether it's something we want to revisit.
Which I love, because the more people know about it, the more chance that people will become more civically engaged.
Right, and no other municipality has this benefit, and private sector employment doesn't have this benefit.
Well, that's what I was thinking too.
Right.
Yeah, the private sector tends, you're paying as an employee 50% or more.
Typically, state minimum's 50-50. But yeah, it's something that you don't see elsewhere. So it needs to be at least talked about.
Yeah, I don't know enough about it to form an opinion, but I agree. I think it's great, even though it'll already have gone by this weekend. But these issues are always ongoing. Right?
Yes.
So 40B.
Yes.
40B. There's a nasty rumor going around that 3 big condo complexes, or I should say 3 more, are going to be built in Plymouth.
Okay.
North Plymouth.
Okay.
Which at first blush, residents are thinking that's going to be, and I don't remember the numbers of how many units. You probably have that memorized. But it's going to be more of a strain on our schools, on our roads.
Yeah.
There's giant potholes out there right now that are the size of swimming pools.
Yeah.
And more of a strain on our police and fire. The hospital's only so big.
Right.
All that. So one question is, what would be the upside? And I understand that, and you'll explain better than I what 40B means, what that means, because it has to do with affordable housing.
It does.
And then there's a whole additional component to this argument, which is whether or not the land that those units are going to be built on is safe.
Correct.
And healthy.
So yes, this is what's called the Pulte Project by Pulte Homes New England, the regional division of a national home development corporation.
Big.
Correct. A big out-of-town developer that clearly by their actions doesn't care about this community and just cares about their quarterly reports and making a profit.
Is there a family member of the company that lives in the area or something today?
No, there's other people in the community that are adjacently related to the project and the area. The land is being sold by a local family.
That's what it is. Okay, yep.
To this developer, and then there's an alternate ZBA member that's also a developer in the community, purchased land that's nearby, and he had to recuse himself from the hearing as a result of that.
That's nice. That's what you should do.
Right.
See a lot of that at the national level.
But Pulte, these people are not from anywhere around here, and the way they conduct themselves, they clearly are just looking to make their money and get out of Dodge. So it's 163 units across 3 buildings off Prince Street and Sandry Drive in North Plymouth. They are 6 stories tall. They have outdoor and underground parking. I think
Do they have enough parking?
They don't have enough parking. They have the absolute minimum under the requirements. And what's important, so 40B is a state statute. If you don't have what's called 10% of your available housing stock, meaning all units, whether they be single-family homes, condominiums, apartments, if 10% of your available housing stock is not in what's called subsidized housing inventory, meaning it is 80% area median income or less to qualify for it, deed restricted, protected to be eligible for affordable housing.
80% is still pretty high.
80% is very high, and that's another issue.
Yeah.
But we are at like 8.4% of SHI, so we need a couple, like 200-ish more units right now. The number resets every census.
Okay.
So
even for us to be in compliance with that,
we need to
more.
Get out ahead of it.
And we need more in general anyway. But
yeah, affordability is a huge concern in the community, although 80% AMI is not very affordable. Right. We do need more affordable housing in the community, but not like this Pulte project. Because
let's talk about that.
It goes into the wrong area for it because it's an area that the infrastructure would be strained. There's small, narrow streets. The lack of sufficient parking, it's like 1.7 unit parking spaces per unit. So that means there's barely enough for the people that live there, let alone guests, right?
Guests, or when they're teenagers, get their licenses,
get a car. Right, exactly. Because we live
less than 2 parking spaces.
Right, we don't live in Suffolk County, so there's not really meaningful public transit. The GATRA does a good job doing what it can, but it's nothing like the MBTA system of buses and subways and things of that nature. So we are in a situation where this is going to strain the road infrastructure. It's going to put a strain on water
and on parking.
On parking,
I'm just processing this. What you're just saying.
Yep.
So even if half the people that buy those condos are two adults live there, each with a car. That means probably one of them is going to be finding some place to park down the road on the road.
Right, and then that's going to further narrow the roads, and then you're going to bring more cars onto the roads driving as well.
Yeah.
So it's just going to create a significant headache in that area.
And then plowing snow
and delivering emergency services and just everything. And it's going to be expensive and it's unwanted. So the good news is we are in temporary safe harbor right now. We have about 15 months left in that because we put a certain number of units online in a given period of time. But we're not at 10% safe harbor. If you get to 10% subsidized housing inventory of your available housing stock, you are in safe harbor in that situation until the next census.
Oh, okay. All
so,
right, cool. And I think I interrupted you. So you were explaining what 40B is.
Oh, yeah. So 40B is a state statute, which when you're not at 10% subsidized housing inventory, you're vulnerable to these developments, which can override local zoning. So the reason we want to get into safe harbor is that the local zoning can control, because this 40B doesn't have to follow local zoning restrictions. That's why it's a 6-story structure, which is in violation of the zoning bylaw, but the zoning bylaw doesn't apply to it.
Okay, yeah, because if I wanted to build on my property, a 2-story 2-unit apartment, I can't do that because of our zoning bylaws.
Yeah, there are different areas of the community have different zones and different zoning overlays over them, but there are guidelines to maintain the character of neighborhoods in a certain way. So
some of these are pretty close to the water.
Yes. Like I grew up in West Plymouth, which is very suburban, so you wouldn't want to see a skyscraper type thing in West Plymouth, right? Mm-hmm. Now, North Plymouth, where I live now, where this project is more urban, but it's still small-scale urban. 6-story structures are quite big.
We don't have any of
so
those,
you wouldn't want to see that there You wouldn't want to see that there either. And it's also near what's called a Superfund site, which was a former dumping ground from a mill furnace back during the cordage years. So the EPA did a process to monitor and control that. And that's a concern to residents that's going to be disturbed directly by the development and indirectly by vibrations and other settlement that will happen as a result of the work.
Wow.
So, I believe in smart and balanced development. So I do think we need more affordable housing, but ideally it would be organically distributed and dispersed throughout the community. So you'd just have houses that fit in with other houses in the community and other buildings that fit in with other buildings, right? Mm-hmm. So that the people having affordable housing would just be another part of that neighborhood. And if you are going to have something like a 40B, you'd want to direct it to an area with infrastructure to support it. Not this, which is small roads in an already congested area. The infrastructure there is inadequate.
As it is.
To support it.
It's
correct.
Inadequate right now.
Exactly. It's inadequate for existing conditions, let alone after 163 units are built and sold.
Yeah. No knock on the town employees and maintenance.
No, they're doing the best they can. But North Plymouth has a lot of what's called pre-existing non-conforming use because zoning didn't come into this community until the 50s. Mm-hmm. And obviously we were building houses and residential plots in Plymouth since 1620. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there are a lot of areas that were built prior to the imposition of zoning that do not conform.
Grandfathered in?
Yes, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So it's a pre-existing non-conforming use. They could continue to exist and be improved upon, but this is very different.
So the
Pulte Homes New England.
Pulte Homes New England. Mm-hmm. So I would think, why can't we just band together as a community and say, no, we don't want it, and then have the...
Yeah. Well, that's what I would like us to do. Yeah. But the Zoning Board of Appeals seems poised to grant the permit with conditions. I would prefer and have advocated for that the permit be denied. They would appeal it. Pulte would appeal it. We would have to litigate that, but I think it's worth doing.
You can't stop me because it's a 40B.
Correct. So there's an appeals process that they could avail themselves of, but I think it's worth fighting. Situate fought Pulte Homes back in, I think it was 2006, in a similar situation. Situate lost on the merits, meaning they didn't have grounds to actually deny the 40B, and the 40B was allowed to go forward. But it had taken so long to work its way through the appeals process that 40B project was never built. So you can run the clock out on these developers because for them, time is money. And so that's what we can't compete with them in terms of money. We can compete with them in terms of time and process, and we should do that. And the idea that it's going to be expensive to litigate it, it might cost us a couple $100,000, but every child in school cost $25,000 to educate. And that's a worthwhile expense. But out of 163 units, it's not going to take more than a few kids to get to
that couple thousand.
To get to a couple 100,000. So you'd at 8 children in schools out of 163 units, which is not very many for that many units.
There'll be more.
Yes, exactly. You're already at 200,000. And that's a recurring expense every year, not just a one-time.
In school is a recurring expense.
Because if they start at kindergarten, they go all the way through high school. That's 13 years of what is right now $25,000 per year and is only going up. So,
not to mention, there's another child in the classroom, and the teachers, the schools are already
they're straining the
overburdened.
existing infrastructure there in terms of human resources. Yes, and so this is something that it's penny wise, but pound foolish to not fight this, because in the long run, having this development will cost us more than litigating it and losing would. Mm-hmm. And we might win. If the argument from some ZBA members has been, well, we'll lose. We had 2% of these go in the town's favor. Well, 100% of the ones where the ZBA rolls over go in the developer's favor. I'd rather take 2% over 0.
Yeah,
particularly if it's a fight worth having. I have a day job where sometimes you fight a fight you know you're going to lose, but it's the right fight to take. And I think we need more leadership in the community that are willing to stand up, even if you're going to lose, because sometimes the fight is worth it in and of itself.
Yeah, that's for sure, and that's honorable. But I didn't realize before. I didn't understand how even if it costs $500,000 to litigate it, it's going to cost more than that to put those kids through school, maintain
Absolutely.
the roads. How many millions of dollars did we go into debt for trying to clear the snow this winter?
It was about $3 million.
Yeah, so that makes sense. And I am hearing more about the research that's being done on those sites and their lack of safety and the arsenic that it's over the acceptable level. But my understanding is that the Environmental Protection Agency goes out and does spot checks, and like it's not too dangerous for us to have there and drive by it and ride by it on our bicycles and things like that.
Right.
And maybe not even for someone to maybe even live on top of it. Right. But it's not completely.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to have a well in it, but as long as the ground is left relatively undisturbed, then it's fine. And over time, it will degrade. In terms of the toxicity level, will diminish. However, the concern in the community and the neighborhood is the indirect and direct disturbances that will happen. That by digging foundations, you're going to have a lot of vibrations, you're going to have a lot of settlement, that'll disturb it, that it could remove some of the topsoil there and cause it to be blowing around in ways that it isn't currently right now and settling into the ground and potentially into groundwater sources. So it is a legitimate and real concern for members of that community. And I think you can deny a 40B for public health and safety reasons. And I think that, and plus the traffic congestion alone that's going to be not only from the cars driving, but the cars parked on the street, narrowing it down.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah, it's going to be. So how is a fire truck going to get through there? How's an ambulance going to get through there? There's a senior housing development near one of those buildings. Yep. And obviously they're going to need emergency services from time to time. Yeah. So what about those people?
And they're narrow roads as it is.
Correct. They're barely up to being able to provide for what is already there, let alone 6-story apartment buildings.
Now, what if the Pulte, what's it called again?
Pulte Homes New England.
Homes New England. What if they come back and say, okay, we'll broaden your road. We'll give you a nice new road. We'll broaden it. We'll give you nice sidewalks.
Well, see, that's what we had originally been talking to them and trying to work out what's called mitigation. That's mitigation with them. And they didn't want to, they walked away from the table. And when they walked away from the table, they not only did they not pursue any of the mitigation we were looking for at that time in a meaningful sense to improve water and road infrastructure, they added more units than they had proposed when we were at the table with them. So to me, just on that alone, we should be combating it because we want to set a precedent with these sort of out-of-town developers that only care about their own profit margins, that if you work with the town, then the town will work out a compromise to provide affordable housing in the community within reason. But if you take your ball and go home and just say, I'm going to use 40B as a weapon, I think we have the weapon of litigation and time that we can wield against them, and I think we should. And I think not doing that only opens our community up to more of these types of developments that we don't want.
Yikes. Yeah. Would there be any measurable benefit to property taxes that would help the town if these condo units go up?
Well, so it would add to our new growth for a year, and it would be in the tax levy going forward. However, residential taxpayers consume more in services on average than they pay for in taxes. And to improve affordability, I want to reduce the burden on residential taxpayers by expanding our commercial tax base so that more residents can live and work in Plymouth with good paying jobs. But you need commercial development to do that. You don't need residential development because, even just having 1 or 2 kids, that's $25,000, $50,000 in services. You're not paying that on your property taxes. And that's just that one service. That's not police protection, fire protection, roads, maintenance, library, et cetera, et cetera. So residential taxpayers are a net negative in terms of the tax rate, and they do cost more over time. So unfortunately, the reason our budgetary concerns are our own fault in a way, because it's all the services that we want that are driving up taxes. Taxes and services are important, and not every resident depends on every service, but some resident depends on at least on each service. So it is important to maintain those services for the people that depend upon them. But we don't want to just have haphazard residential development where other people think we should have it. Instead, the town should take a leadership approach in strategically placing it where we have the infrastructure to support it so it is not as significant of a drain on the community's ability to provide the service.
Yeah.
We can be smart about it and be effective, or we can do what we've done for years and let other people make our decisions for us. And I know which I would prefer.
I know which I would prefer as well. We're probably on the same wavelength there. I mean, it just doesn't make sense.
Right.
Doesn't add up. So how would you bring more commercial building or commercial development to Plymouth?
Our zoning bylaw is a great tool for targeting the types of businesses we'd like to see, more good-paying blue-collar jobs that are the backbone of a local economy, and white-collar jobs, because 70% of Plymouthians commute out of Plymouth in order to afford to live here, and 70% of our current workforce commutes from out of Plymouth in order to work here. So we're not providing jobs in Plymouth that Plymouthians can afford to sustain themselves with. Mm-hmm. And that's bad for their quality of life, and it's bad for our community's sustainability. So I think we should be bringing in more blue-collar jobs, more professionals, more biotech, med tech.
How do we do that?
Well, we can partner with Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center and leverage our relationship there. Now that it's not Jordan Hospital, it's Beth Israel, one of the best hospitals in the world. Mm-hmm. We have higher education institutions like no other in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and we can partner with them to bring jobs down here, as well as
get Harvard to come into the industrial park or something?
Well, you could, but you could have co-op programs, and you could have research grants. You could have like a Woods Hole North at the Holtec parcel property, for example, and bring in a lot of good earth science type jobs. And you could also work with vocational institutes, including our own high schools, to provide a pipeline for blue-collar jobs for plumbers, electricians, because not everybody needs to go to college and to get a good high-paying job. You can have a great job in the trades, and the trades are what builds the backbone of your local economy. Mm-hmm. So I think it needs to be a holistic approach to this solution.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Well, the election is May 16th?
Yes, Saturday, May 16th. There will be early voting in the week and a half prior to that, from the Wednesday to the Wednesday, as well as mail-in voting, as long as you applied by May 11th for a mail-in
So how do
ballot.
folks do that if they want to do it? And I've done it for many years now, and it's wonderful.
Yeah, if you go to the town website and go to the town clerk's section of it, there's instructions on when mail-in voting registration deadlines are, as well as when early in-person voting at town hall will be. And you can also find out where your polling place is, if you don't know, for Election Day on May 16th, if you prefer to vote day of. But yes, it is an important election. I think probably the most important election locally that we've had in decades. And I hope everybody turns out, and I would appreciate getting as many votes as I possibly can to continue trying to make Plymouth a better community. You will have 2 votes for Select Board, and I would humbly ask for at least one of those.
Wow, that's amazing, and thank you for explaining this. And
absolutely.
As I mentioned, one of our missions is to encourage civic engagement. So we really appreciate you coming on and explaining this to all of us. And thanks so much. And I wish you the best of luck on May 16th.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me.
You're welcome.